Please be seated.
When I was in the Holy Land, for those of you who are new, I took a trip to the Holy Land. It's kind of become a running joke around here because I open pretty much every sermon with that. When I was in the Holy Land, I did not go to the Mount of Transfiguration. I'm sorry. This story is called the Transfiguration story, and in it, Jesus is transformed, transfigured, and his face shines like the sun. Interestingly, this morning at the 8 o'clock worship, that stained glass window right there, the sun was shining right through Jesus' face. It's the only time I've ever posted on social media during worship. But I couldn't resist. It was too cool. So if you imagine the sun shining through that face so that you can't see it, that's what it looked like, and it took place on this mountain. Now, I was near it. I was on Mount Carmel, and Mount Carmel has an overlook, just like any kind of overlook you've been to on any mountain, with one of those walls that's just high enough that you can't fall over it and fall off the cliff, you know what I mean? And there were signs, just like in other places you've been that say, this is that way and this is this way. And so I did see a sign that said Mount of Transfiguration, 30 miles that way, and it pointed off that way. And there was this thing, and I did kind of see it, but I didn't go there, and I certainly wasn't close. What I did see recently, though, is Pikes Peak. I was away last weekend. That's why we had this special guest who told you all about my trip to Holy Land from a different perspective. I was in Colorado. My mentor, Dave Jensen, invited me to go to Colorado and lead a retreat at his church and preach. If you'd like to see that sermon, we link to it in our weekly email on Friday, so if you didn't read the whole thing, which is okay, we still love you, you can go through that and you can watch it there. He also asked me to lead a retreat on Saturday, which went well, so we'll do it here. They were kind of my guinea pigs, like I wanted to try it out there and see how it went. It went well. Dave is the one that gave me this. I spent a year working with Dave in Colorado at a church there, and it was a great year. And Dave received this cross from his mentor, and then he, as my mentor, gave it to me, and someday I will give this cross to a young pastor that I've mentored. I have my eye on a couple, not really sure who yet, but someday I will do that. So I went out there, and I did all this stuff, but we had a day free, and so Dave said, Scott, we're thinking about moving. I want you to come look at my hole in the ground. I said, okay. He said, we don't have a house, we just have a hole in the ground. So come look at the hole in the ground. All right, Dave, I'll come look at your hole in the ground. So we got in the car and we drove to this property that he's thinking of buying, and all that was there was the foundation. So there's just concrete that had been poured, and Dave said, Scott, I want you to come around here to the back. So okay, went around to the back, and he said, this is where the deck is going to be, and I want you to look. And I looked up, and there were trees here, and there were trees here, and right in the middle, 14,000 feet, was Pikes Peak. It was awesome. And I was like, Dave, you got to buy it. He's like, I know, right? But I stood there looking at Pikes Peak, and it reminded me of why it was that I wanted, when I graduated seminary, to go back to Colorado so badly. I mean, we had a great year, Dave and I. The church was fantastic. There was a lot of energy, a lot of new things, exciting things happening. I loved it. It was just a fantastic year. When I read about this transfiguration experience, that Peter and James and John had, it reminds me of my year in Colorado. It was amazing. And like them, I wanted to stay, right? I wanted to go back. And I remember the day that we had the draft, right? And when you graduate from seminary in the Lutheran Church, there's literally a draft, okay? It's like ESPN, it's like the NFL, right? Like you graduate and like all the different bishops go to like a hotel room and they draft you. There's no like signing bonuses if you get drafted higher or lower, like it kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of a bummer. I think I went pretty high, I'm not sure, but It's not like that, but they really do. They have a draft, and then they announce, where you went. And it's not like, they don't go up front and get a jersey or anything, but it's still a big moment. And I remember when my name got called, and I said I was going to Atlanta. I said words. Happy birthday was not one of them. I was like, what? Like I'm going to Atlanta? I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. And so, when we read this story, and we talk about Peter, James, and John, and how they had this mountaintop experience, this amazing moment, and they just wanted to stay there, I get it. I get it. I've been there. And I bet you have too. I bet you've had moments and times and places where you were somewhere with someone doing something and you just didn't want it to end. I get it. I can't blame them at all. But as I stood there looking at Pikes Peak, I thought about all those years in Atlanta. 16 great years. And okay, there were some hiccups, some bumps in the road, some things I changed, but I would not have traded those 16 years for anything. And as I stood there looking at Pikes Peak, I thought about where I am now in Michigan. And I thought, you know what? I like it in Michigan. I enjoy it. I'm happy. The family's good. The kids are good. Everything is good. And I thought about these guys, Peter, James, and John, and how they didn't want to come off the mountain, and all the things that they got to experience when they did. If they'd stayed on the mountain, the things they wouldn't have seen. They wouldn't have seen Jesus' resurrection, his ascension. They wouldn't have seen the miracles that they did. They wouldn't have seen the church grow to become what it did. If they'd stayed on the mountain, they wouldn't have seen any of that. We have been talking here for a little while about radical hospitality, about being gracious, kind, inviting, and generous to one another. And my hope for you, all of you in this room right now, whether you've been here 150 years or today's your first day, is for everyone to experience that, to have that kind of mountaintop experience like we read about in this story, and not just in this room, right? But all over the whole campus, right? Outside, on the labyrinth, in the Abbey, in the meeting rooms, in that hallway that by the grace of God, someday we're going to get renovated and it's going to be awesome. In the music center, everywhere. That is my hope and my prayer for you, that this can be a mountaintop for you. But my hope and prayer for you is also that we'll go out, like Peter, James, and John. We'll go out and we'll share those things. That we'll be gracious and kind and inviting and generous to those outside this place. That will come down from the mountain as they did and share it all. Because not everyone gets to go to the Mount of Transfiguration, but we can bring it to them. Amen.